We're here at the 2016 Fannin County Sports Hall of Fame induction, and we have as a special guest this evening Coach Boyce Buddy Padgett. Coach Padgett was the first coach in the history of West Fannin High School, and we want to get some comments from him about what it was like way back then. Coach, can you tell us about your early life, where you went to high school and college, that sort of thing?
I grew up in Hayesville, North Carolina, which is not too far from here. Played football, basketball, and had all the joys of high school there, and then went on to Western Carolina on scholarship and didn't play too much the first 2 years, but the third and fourth year I made all conference at guard and linebacker. And from there I started coaching in a little school called Oakley High School right out of Asheville, North Carolina, which stayed 3 years, and I coached basketball, football, basketball, boys and girls, baseball, track and field, and thought I had it made.
Was that your goal in life at that time, was to be a coach?
That was my first goal. And my second goal was to go into administration, but I knew that was down the road. So when we finished 3 years at Oakley, we applied for the West Fannin job.
How'd you hear about it?
Somebody in the Western Carolina office, and I don't know where or who it was, but they told me about it, and I called Travis Guthrie, and he set up an interview.
Right.
And came over and interviewed for the job, and was glad to get it, and moved my family to Blue Ridge, and started work. West Fannin wasn't quite complete as a building yet. There was no pavement. A lot of the building was still under construction.
No football field.
No football field. We had to practice at Epworth or dress out at McCaysville or somewhere else. But we didn't have any football uniforms. So that was our first project, was to find some place that we could buy uniforms for enough kids to start the program with the budget that we had. The board had put $5,000 into the bucket for the purchase of uniforms, and Mr. Guthrie had found out that Hiawassee College over in Madisonville, Tennessee, I think, was dropping football and wanted to sell all their equipment. So Mr. Guthrie and myself and Mr. Hall, who was the chairman of the school board at the time, went over with the $5,000 in our pocket and bought the uniforms for about 25 or 30 kids.
Yeah.
And most of them were too big for what students we had, so we had to
helmets, pads, everything, right?
And we had all of these kids coming out for football that had some of them never seen a game. Some had never had a football uniform on, and so we met the first day of practice at Epworth and dressed in the gymnasium, and I have that vision still of all these kids coming out of that gymnasium with uniforms on backwards, helmets on backwards, pads, knee pads that should have been in the front of the pants was in the back, and it was quite a sight for sore eyes. And I've had a lot of good laughs over it. And Dinky Talley was always one of my favorite kids.
Yeah. And
Dinky came out of the gymnasium with his helmet on backwards, and I told Jim Hayward, who was my only coach, I told Jim, I said, he looks just like a big turtle. So he got the name Turtle Talley, and it stuck with him all these years. But I love Dinky, and I'm not saying anything to disparage him. It's just that he was a great kid, and we had kids with a lot of ability but no skill, had skills but no fundamentals. So we had to start with the fundamentals and work up. And
how'd you handle the transportation? I mean, you had to get some of these kids are not 16 yet, so they don't have driver's license. How'd you get them all from different parts?
There was enough in Blue Ridge that had license to kind of carpool and get out there, and then I don't know how the kids from McCaysville, I guess they did the same thing, and the Epworth kids were close so they could walk in. But it was not an easy task to get kids back and forth.
Right.
But we had no field. We did, in the second year, we built a stadium with Well, it was, I guess, a stadium. It seated about 300 or 400 people.
Volunteer labor, as I remember.
Volunteer labor, and Tennessee Copper Company sent a lot of trucks to haul dirt, and the county commissioner gave us a lot of help with his machinery, and we moved the mountain into a valley there beside the school, and then we built, during the same period of time, we built the locker room out at the edge of that field, and that's where we practiced and where we played our games the second year. But the first year was mostly, our schedule consisted mostly of junior varsity teams, and we even played the Red Elephants from Gainesville twice. And we beat them both times, but we have to remind ourselves we were playing the JV team, and, but we were a first-year school, and, I thought we did well I
think you played 3 varsity teams. You played Bryson City, as I recall. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
But then you beat a couple of teams that were also first-year teams, I think. North Whitfield. And Menlo.
Dalton and Menlo. And it worked out pretty well. The second year, we were pretty well forced to go into that Northeast Georgia conference. And that was rough. When you get with Cartersville and all of those schools, you're really out of a second-year schedule link.
Now, your first year, you wore burgundy uniforms, as I remember.
Yeah.
That was the color, I guess, at Hiawassee College.
Right, yeah.
And then the next year, you switched over to gold and white?
Yeah.
So I guess you have enough money to...
Well, somewhere the money came to buy new jerseys and new pants. And during that period of time, a committee, and I got blamed for it a few times, but I didn't have anything to do with the mascot. We selected the colors of Georgia Tech. And the people from Georgia got a little upset with us. And I think we outlived that over time. But
you also picked the Georgia Tech nickname, Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, the Yellow Jackets, and see the kids and I don't really know who the committee was. But it wasn't me. I didn't know enough about Georgia football to make an influence, but it worked out fine. And I've never seen a situation where 3 communities came together and the kids it was like a melting pot. They came together and associated with each other, and we never had a problem with community versus community.
A lot of support, I guess.
Dr. Herbert Boyce was the principal, and he was a world's best communicator, and he was the one that really was the functioneer of bringing that community together, 3 into 1.
Now you ran the single wing, as I remember.
We stayed with my old single wing. It was one that I'd run in college and one that I'd been very successful with in Asheville for the 3 years that I coached there. And we stayed with it the first year, but second year we started moving a little bit toward it. T-formation and running a few buck laterals and a few belly series, trying to get into a little bit more modern.
The single wing, I think the only 2 college teams probably that still ran it were Tennessee and UCLA at that time. So
and they had a different version. This was a North Carolina version of the single wing, where it's unbalanced line and pulling guards.
And you coached boys basketball also?
I coached boys basketball.
You had no gym, you had to go?
We had to go like we did before. We had to find some place to play. The old gym in Blue Ridge, the gym at Epworth, and the one at McCaysville. And that's pretty much where our schedules took us. But the second year, what was Pete's last name?
Pete Bryant.
Pete Bryant came in and coached basketball, and I only coached the football. But it was a great time, and kids were, well, the fact that they still communicate with me indicates to me that somewhere along the line, coaches get respect, and I hope I deserved it all. But I pride myself in the fact that, and I'm a little bit humble, because I mean, what other profession can you be in and and the people that you associate most with, which in this case was students, remember you after 50, 55,
right.
60 years.
Yep. And all the ones that are still around talk very fondly of their time with you.
They're a great group of people, and Ronnie had a list of the deceased group from just our football, and it just breaks my heart to see how many of those kids didn't make it.
But we still got quite a few left, so
so
take pride
we
in
have
that.
to praise those and stick by them and meet with them.
After 2 years coaching at West Fannin, you moved on to administration.
Right.
To Blue Ridge Elementary?
I moved to Blue Ridge Elementary School
As principal? Or?
as principal, and I stayed there for 3 years.
Okay. Did you coach the elementary school teams?
We didn't have an elementary football program at the time, so we started the elementary, actually what today would be middle school. We started that program, and they started it over at East Fannin, and we went to Hayesville, North Carolina, several different places, and those kids started playing football. Hopefully helped them get a jump on the high school.
Yeah.
But that was fun too, because they'd never had football.
Yeah. So you were here 5 years.
I was here 5 years.
And then just tell us what happened after that. I know you went to Florida.
I had an opportunity to go to Brevard County, Florida, which still is and was then the best school system in Florida. We had the space industry all around us with all the innovation that was happening in the space industry. The schools were almost new. In fact, the school I moved to was still coming up out of the ground when I started at that school in a temporary building in 1960. And I stayed in that school. We went ahead and completed it.
Were you just in administration then, or were you still coaching at all?
No, I was not coaching at all. And I did when my son got to the Little League early football age. I coached his team for 3 years. We still brag about beating everybody in the system of 21 games that we won and one that we lost. I never lived that one loss down with a friend of mine because he had coached the one that beat us. He always reminded me of it.
It's always tough.
But anyway, I stayed at that school 3 years, and then they asked me if I'd take a new school, which was again in temporary buildings. So I stayed there 6 years.
And what was your job there?
And I was principal all the way. And then after Sable Elementary, the 6 years there, they had a problem with a middle school, a junior high school that needed some repair work internally. And they asked me to take that job, and I stayed at Hoover Junior High School for 3 years as principal. And then this was right during two factors. We had a terrible drug problem in those years. This was the early 70s. And we had just integrated the school system in the early 70s, and Rockledge High School was having terrible integration problems, and in fact they'd had a bomb exploded at a pep rally, and they had teachers riding buses to stop the riots. And so they asked me to take that job and see if I could do something with it, and I went in July of '72 and stayed there until '75, and in the 3 years we went from being the doormat of the county to being the best school in the county. And so after that they asked me to build a high school.
From scratch? From
scratch. So I built what's now called Palm Bay High School and stayed with it for 17 years and retired from there.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, go ahead.
During that time, as a high school principal, I was very active in local athletic situations, and after about 8 years I became a member of the Florida High School Activities Association, which is the governing body for the athletics in the state of Florida. So at the end of that 8 years I was elected by the state principals as vice president of that organization, and I stayed there until I retired as vice president of the association.
One more question, where people are coming in for dinner, so I need to make
Yeah.
this short. You are a member of the Florida High School Sports Hall of Fame? Is that what it's called?
In 1995, I was voted in to the Hall of Fame for Florida High School Activities.
The whole state?
Whole state.
Okay.
So I'm proud.
You should be, yeah. It's a great
And
accomplishment.
I'll give Fannin County a lot of the credit because they made me a man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Coach Padgett, I certainly appreciate your time and your comments, and we hope to talk to you a lot more as time
Okay.
goes by. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for taking it in.